Northampton and affordable housing. With an average rent in the city of about $1,200 a month, you might not pair those two together. But there are several affordable housing projects either newly opened or on the horizon there. Faith Williams of Wayfinders and Joanne Campbell of Valley Community Development spoke with me about the projects.
Oftentimes it's about opportunity and what's available, and it is a very welcoming community. The city, municipal mothers and fathers are very interested in affordable housing and very supportive of it.
And Faith, actually, I think it was in the Daily Hampshire Gazette, you said something to the effect of you didn't think that this project, and we're talking about the Live 155 project in particular, would get done in any other community that you're working with at this point. Was that accurately quoted in the paper?
That was accurately quoted, and what I meant by that is because Northampton is so welcoming, and there really is a highlight on the Pleasant Street corridor. The city of Northampton obtained funds to really address that corridor, has made it much more bike friendly, a lot more visibility, has incorporated the bike path into the street crossing in a way that I think would have taken longer and had been much more of a struggle in another community. And that's not to say that there aren't other communities in Western Massachusetts that are welcoming. Amherst is another example. We have 2 properties in Amherst that were very much supported by the town of Amherst.
When we look at affordable housing in general and you see the images, or you walk by the existing, or you see images of what Lumberyard will look like, I think that many people will be really surprised to see the quality of the construction, how modern they are. There's even some environmentally friendly elements rolled into those. Do you think was that an intention that you set out with these, to make them very slick, very modern looking?
I mean, I think the funding sources as well as our organizations are very much interested in creating well-developed properties that will last for many years, and we're also obviously interested in environmental issues, and that's one of the reasons we would want to develop on a Pleasant Street, because it's close to transportation, it's close to the bike path, it's close to downtown, it's close to services. I went to the salsa dancing downtown on Saturday night, saw a number of tenants there, so it's a place where folks who live downtown can take advantage of what's happening downtown, whether it's free or whether it's low cost. So I know Live 155 has solar panels, or we hope, assuming we have enough money left in our contingency, to do the same thing. The construction, is very airtight.
And also, these are mixed-use developments. So you have, retail on the first floor and then the residential above, which I think adds to that other element that you're speaking about in terms of making it really integral to the community itself.
Also, part of the design is also driven by the zoning bylaws in Northampton. The commercial space on the first floor in that particular zone is a requirement, and also they're looking for the building to fit the aesthetic of Pleasant Street. So if you go down Pleasant Street a little bit further, you see brick buildings with commercial on the first floor, and that's the kind of thing that they were looking for.
But I think one of the challenges of affordable housing I hear from people is there's a stigma attached to it that they're not well maintained, or they're just not very safe spaces. Are you working against that stigma?
I would say that we are actively working against that stigma, and I think that people walk around with a picture of what it is. And I know I certainly go to Zoning Board of Appeals meetings, and people have an idea of what it is in their head. They think of concrete towers where there's a lot of crime and a lot of other things that go on unsupervised. And I always invite people to come to our properties, because I think that they would be astounded that these are considered to be affordable properties.
Property management is key to keeping well-maintained and happy tenants and happy neighbors.
Yeah.
Another piece of that is something that we're focusing on more and more is resident engagement. So we have an active we have 2 types of resident engagement. We have, for our elderly properties, we have resident engagement to help people age in place, making adaptations to their unit or other things that allow them to stay in their unit longer. In our family properties, we are reaching out to the community that they're located in, finding out what the resources are there, doing after-school homework assignments, and then bringing residents of the property together in advisory committees to see what's going on in their lives, what would benefit them, and what would bring them together as a more cohesive community within a larger community. And we're finding a great return on that investment in terms of the satisfaction that people have in living in our properties. And I'm happy to say that, and Joanne can speak to this, because of that initiative, we've actually had a resident join our larger Wayfinders board, which is very exciting.
I also sit on Wayfinders board, even though I run Valley Community Development. I'm on Wayfinders boards, part of our relationship. So
when you look at Northampton overall right now, you're each attached to an organization that has a very specific project, but there's several other affordable or subsidized housing projects happening in Northampton right now. What is it about Northampton? Is it that opportunity piece, or was Northampton a community in the Western Mass region that really was lacking for these units, and that's why there's a focus there now?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is we have another property we'll be partnering with Wayfinders. It's an existing 15-room SRO, single-room occupancy building. So I think there's a lot, just like with the Live 155 that replaced Northampton Lodging, that because of the state hospital and the VA, there were a lot of single people who were living in less than desirable locations. And so there's a strong market and a strong desire on the part of people in Northampton and the municipality and organizations like ourselves who are interested in housing folks who have maybe some more challenges. And so we're looking to expand and redevelop this 15-unit SRO into 31 basically small studio apartments. It's a supportive housing.
Taking an existing space and renovating it, where
and expanding it.
With Live 1.5, it did have to be demolished and then rebuilt. So just different approaches there. Something else that I've heard from people who are concerned when they hear affordable or subsidized housing, they say this is unfair to them. They feel like it is a handout. It is something that they find really troubling when they say, I'm working hard to make ends meet. Why does this type of housing exist? What would you say to them?
A lot of the people who work in our unit, who live in our units, are actually working at places like Walmart and CVS, Stop and Shop. And it's difficult with that type of a job to earn a living wage. So there are a lot of full-time people living in our developments. Everybody, in my opinion, deserves a safe, decent, and affordable place to live. And that we are an incredibly wealthy nation, and that we would stand for people living in substandard conditions is just not reasonable. And that I believe both of our missions is to kind of meet people where they are and stabilize them, and hopefully they can find a way up. However, what Joanne mentioned earlier is that within my lifetime, I moved to the Valley in 1976. A lot of people have been deinstitutionalized, and they are a difficult population to house. Nevertheless, they deserve a place to live. And so our society used to deal with people by putting them in state hospitals. There was a decision made to do away with state hospitals, but that didn't alleviate the problem of these people needing a place to live.
Faith Williams, Joanne Campbell, thanks for coming in today.